All right, welcome to Question Stems to Melt Your Students' Minds. We have been sitting here listening to a few answers that have been chimed in as far as how are questions like seeds. Had some amazing, great answers, talking everything from the root and the being the seed that then allows the plant to bloom from that, and that's the answer. Also the idea that questions are the starting point and that we nurture those things, and by doing that nurturing, it allows them to grow. And also, man, doesn't matter, it could be a tiny, tiny seed, like a mustard seed, but asking those kind of questions that just get in there, there's no telling how far we can expand or how far we can grow. So let me say welcome, let me say thank you. This will hopefully be an interactive webinar. I say hopefully because obviously it depends on technology, but we'll do our best. So quick, who am I? My name is Justin Botter. Last name sounds like water with a V. And my role at Region 10 is working with authentic assessment and innovative instruction. So example of that, I taught for 8 years as a writing teacher. This is actually my first year to be at Region 10. And one thing I did not like about writing instruction, for example, when I taught in 7th grade, was the 7th grade writing STAR test. And so the reason I left the classroom is because they opened up this new position at Region 10, which allows me to look for more authentic ways to assess writing. One cool project I have going on right now is working with the state to work on a writing portfolio. So for example, you can say, we don't want to do the writing STAR this year. Instead, we're going to do a writing portfolio. It still has a beginning and an ending piece, but along the way that we are taking in samples of writing process and taking in samples of the final product, and that allows us to have a portfolio at the end of the year. And so that portfolio that is graded throughout the entire year, which is authentic teaching in the writing classroom, also becomes the state standard test. So we're in the middle of working through one of those projects. Another cool one to talk about that I'm blessed to be a part of is learning on location. So this summer, if you have to take some PD, I recommend going to Region 10 and searching for learning on location. We have gone to different locations and have vetted, for example, the Pro Museum, the wetlands in Seagaville, among many others, Fair Park, and you say, I want to go there and I want to take a team, it could be 2 or more, and we want to hang out and we want to write curriculum. So really cool option, check it out, it's learning on location. The official application opens next Monday, so if you want to be a part of that, fantastic. But yeah, that's who I am, that's what I do. Authentic ways to check for understanding inside the classroom and innovative ways to provide instruction. And so those are just a couple things. Hopefully you punched in the URL for the handouts. I'll be referring to a few handouts. I'll be closing down this PowerPoint at one point and pulling those up, and hopefully you can have those with you. If there's anything that you see that I haven't included, please let me know. And that being said, let's jump right in. So I want to talk real fast about norms and logistics and objectives. So norms, a couple things people don't know about this end of the webinar is I need your questions to stay engaged. It's me in front of a computer, and so when I'm in front of actual people, I can read faces and all that stuff. So I can't do that here. Stay engaged, ask me questions, join in the fun. Tell me if I'm too loud or too quiet, too fast. Sometimes I get excited and talk too quickly. Let me know those things. I'm not embarrassed. The other part is this is kind of an interesting part. On mine for attendance, I see a person's name, and I don't know why, but if you open up a window in front of that, so for example, like if you have your email open or you switch to another browser, it shows you as being inattentive. Is that true? I don't know. Maybe you're online Googling something that I'm talking about, so I don't know. But I do know that if it shows you being inattentive the whole time, then the attendance is messed up. So just a little piece of the norms there. Finally, roll with it. Have some fun. I'm trying this thing called the shared questions. You've already had a chance to pitch out some answers, and so this is new for me to try this function. So let's roll with it. If it works, great, and if not, we'll roll with it. And then finally, again, we have the chat open on the bottom. Tell me how to make this relevant for you. I'm not sure of the content area you're in. I'm not sure of even the grade level. So let's make sure this time is relevant for you. Moving to logistics, there's the link for the handout again. It'll be on the bottom of most of the slides just in case. Let me know if you're having trouble. I can keep checking my email here and see. Oh, yep, there we go. Grace has even sent me in an email. Questions help students break through the soil and understand. So Grace is having trouble with the question panel, but she was able to send that question in and I could see it. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Send that answer and I was able to see it. And then finally, I will try something as well, which is I can unmute you so that you can talk. So for example, like Shelby. I'll say, hey, Shelby, what do you teach? And I can turn the microphone on. Now, I just put Shelby on the spot, so that's not fair. How about I'll pick somebody else? Let's go with Felicia. Felicia Gray. Okay, I'm going to unmute you. Felicia, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, how you doing, Felicia?
I'm great. How are you?
Good, good. Thank you for letting me put you on the spot for a second. What grade level do you teach?
I am not a teacher. I'm an academic facilitator with DISD.
Okay, but let me ask you that question then too. How can I make this relevant to you and in your capacity?
Uh, I'm always looking for innovative new ways to add to my bag to be able to support my campuses. So questioning is something that has come up several times, and
Okay.
so I'm looking for what you have to offer to help me help them.
Well, now you made me nervous. I like it. Thanks. Okay, I'm going to mute you back up again. I appreciate it, Felicia. Thank you.
hmm
Let's hear from one more. How about we jump to, how about Karen? Karen Kelton. Karen, I have unmuted. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hey, Karen, tell us what you teach and where you're from and your favorite color.
I teach third grade reading, writing, and social studies at Dodge City ISD. And my favorite color is, I don't really have a favorite color.
You're like,
I don't really like the color black,
there you
but
go.
I like anything colorful.
You're like, I'm not Buddy the Elf and I'm not 7, so I don't have a favorite color. Let me ask that question too then, because you can see the wide scope of people that are here. How can I make it relevant for you, third grade, in your capacity?
Well, one of my T-test goals this year was to help my students in their writing to respond more to what they have been reading, and so I was just kind of looking for some different questioning stems to get them thinking and writing more about what they're reading.
Okay, okay. Okay, I'm gonna mute you up so you can breathe a sigh of relief. Thank you, Karen. Okay, so yeah, in regards to what Karen just said, I will do my best to give a little background. So we're going to do about 5 to 6 different slides talking about the how and the why and the research. It's good stuff, and it's good stuff because as you get into these kind of mind-melding question stems, which will be that slide that then comes up, as you get into those, you kind of want to know where you're coming from and why you're going that way. So there we go. So the objective is that you can use something immediately in your classroom. At the very least, you can try one of these questions, and then at a higher level, you can kind of think through why. Okay, all right, let's see. So jumping back over to this PowerPoint. All right, let's do a little shout out. There are a lot of questions going on. So why do we need mind-melding questions? I want to do like a little bit of Family Feud, the survey says kind of style here. Okay, I have some research and theory that spans 4 decades, and it's talking about the number of questions that teachers ask each day. All right, so I'm going to start with the first question, and let's put it here. I'll throw it into the chat so you can write your answers back. Okay, so my first question is, on average, how many questions do primary teachers ask during a school day? So I'm typing this as I write it here. On average, how many questions do primary teachers ask during a school day? All right, let me give the audience a second to respond to that. And again, if you can't see the question pane for some reason, feel free to email your answer in. I'm laughing because Melanie's answer is 12,000. Yeah, if you think about it per student, right? You're like, hey, where's your backpack? Where's your folder? Did you go to the restroom? Okay, so according to the research, oh, there we go, getting a few more in there. According to the research, on average, primary teachers ask 348 questions during the school day. 348 questions. That kind of breaks down to, there's another research that's from Floyd and his research, and there's another researcher, Gambriel, who actually went to the detail of pinpointing how many that is per second. So every 43 seconds, a question is being asked. Okay, so let me ask one more question in this kind of Family Feud style here. The teachers actually asked 45 to 150 questions each half hour. Okay, so that's not a question yet, I know that. The teacher asked 45 to 150 questions every half hour. ... How many questions did they think they asked? I hope that makes sense. I just typed it in there. So they actually asked 45 to 150 questions, but then when asked after the fact and said, hey, how many questions do you think you asked? What was their response? I'm going to clear off this other answer choice here. If I'm deleting yours, I apologize. I'm cleaning off the last answer choice. There we go. They're all from Fresh. There we go. Felicia, I like your answer in the other direction. 3. Real fast, it's a piece of housekeeping. Grace, if you can't see my slides, I'm going to say the URL out loud. I know that's not very convenient. I'm going to give you the URL, and that will take you to a shared folder, and this presentation is saved there. So everyone else, just go ahead and keep answering that question. The URL is https, once again, https:// so goo.gl, BKNK, capital N, U. So I'll say that last part again. B as in boy, K as in kite, N as in Nancy, K as in kite, capital N, still Nancy, and U as in umbrella. I'll also email you back with a picture. Okay, thank you for your patience. So once again, they actually asked 45 to 150, and when they asked about their perception, the response was 12 to 20. So even at the very least, that's 1245. So there's about a third. So the perception is we're asking about a third. Point is, there's a lot of questioning going on. Whether that's good or bad, we'll kind of get into just for a second. But there's a lot of it happening. And so can we make the questions as relevant as possible? Let's go into the next bullet point here on the slide, which says, higher order questions alone do not show any consistent effect. All right, so this is inside the handout folder, and I put it inside there just in case you want to show anybody. I put it in here, and I called it Marzano Effective Higher Order Questioning. I had to kind of make it faded so you could see it better on the screen, but I saved it as a Word document so you can manipulate it as needed. I'll try and talk through it the best I can here. All right, so point is, you see up here, study is examining the relationship of question levels to student achievement. On this left-hand column, it says lower order questions are more effective. I'll say that again. Asking a lower order question, as we typically associate the Bloom's taxonomy, that's more effective for what? Student achievement. Well, there have been studies that range from 1970 to 1979, all showing that lower order questioning is indeed more effective. Okay, so that feels a little counterproductive. How about higher order questions? Are they more effective for student achievement? Well, the studies here from 1965 to 2006 all show an indicator of about the same effect size. Now again, it's not a meta-analysis, so I can't really talk about effect size, but I can say the number of studies from this particular meta-analysis show that they're not as effective. Now what about no difference or inconclusive results? You can see right down the middle of the page, it keeps going and going, ranging from 65, there's 87. So what can we conclude from that? I mean, my takeaway is, I don't know, right? Just having a higher order thinking question in and of itself, it's we can't show it being effective. And that makes sense if you think about it in the context of the classroom, because let's say, okay, forgive me here, but let's just say it's your evaluative walkthrough, you're teaching, and in comes your administrator, and so you instantly say to yourself, you, hey, in the back, justify why you are picking your nose right now. You're asking a higher level of thinking question, but is it effective to actual student achievement? All right. Case in point, let's say that you are sitting there and you're actually on topic this time, and you say, hey, in the back, justify, you know, the character's motivation. Well, if that question was not properly cultivated, then you're not going to get a whole lot of higher order thinking out of it. Hence, you're not going to get a whole lot of student achievement out of it. I hope I'm not talking in circles. Maybe I can make it a little more clear by saying just asking the question in and of itself without any kind of a context, it shows no relationship to student achievement. Marzano, in his book, he has a book I'm about to mention here in a second. The name of the book is Questioning Sequences in the Classroom. Once again, Questioning Sequences in the Classroom. He mentions the same idea. He says, okay, let's imagine that a kid is at home the night before and they're talking at the dinner table about should they install solar panels on the roof. And so it doesn't matter if he's living in a rural area or an urban area. They're just talking about would it be effective, would it be cost beneficial. They're weighing all these things. Well, the next day in your class, you ask the question, man, you know, evaluate the use of solar panels. Now, you've used a higher order thinking for Bloom's taxonomy. You've used an evaluation question. But the deal is that kid already has prior knowledge. So are they actually engaging in higher order thinking? I'll say it again. If they've already gone through the evaluation process on anything, really, and you ask an evaluation level question, aren't they just kind of recalling what they've already done? Nuts, because recall is back to square one. So the argument that Marzano makes, and I like to make inside this one too, is the mind-melding question, or even the higher order thinking question process, doesn't happen in isolation. It happens in a sequence. And so we'll get more into that sequence later in the presentation. Okay, I feel like I've covered a lot. Again, I've got the question panes open here, so let me know. I also have the chat session here. Let me know if you have any questions. If not, I'm going to open the PowerPoint and keep going. Okay, what are other reasons that we need mind-melding questions? Well, this comes from researcher Taylor as part of the ineffective part, Roger Taylor. But I would like to also say from personal experience that if you ask just a Bloom's level question stem, it can come across as kind of dry and outside the student's vernacular and language. And so the students tend to be kind of non-responsive to those things. Taylor was real big into divergent questions, which is what we'll get into here in a second. And then finally, higher order thinking, well, it requires cognition. Think about that for a second. You're right. It makes you cognitively process if you're asking a question on a higher order thinking level. But it doesn't necessarily require complexity. And so when you begin to get into complexity and think about multiple systems, you get into the researchers Kaplan and Van Tassel-Baska. What are the takeaways here? Why do we need mind-melding questions? Because we're asking a lot of questions as practitioners. It shows that just asking higher order thinking questions alone doesn't show a consistent effect. Even if we did ask those higher order thinking questions, they're kind of dry and the students aren't responsive to them. And even if they are responsive to them, then we've required them to think, to cognate in some capacity, but we haven't required any kind of complexity. And second, you mentioned the word complexity, you begin to get this whole idea of creating and creativity and cross systems and cross-pollination. But, okay. Okay, I'm taking a pause real fast. I cannot open the PowerPoint or the Word document on the Word document called Hot Questions. So I apologize. Let's just take one pause to make sure that the folder is working okay. I'm going to dive right in here. Because again, this webinar will end, and I want you to be able to walk away with some handouts that you can use, or power search, excuse me. Kind of feel like I should say like coffee talk amongst yourselves. Okay, so I've shared a folder called Webinar Mindmelding Questions. You know what? If you try to open one that has that tiddly in front of it, or that squiggle, that is a file that I currently have open. So try the one that's down here, Effective Hot Questioning. In fact, you know what? Just so there's no confusion, let me go ahead and close that down. I'm guessing probably the same reason for the PowerPoint. If you notice, like, I have it open. So that little indicator in the front is showing that it's open. So maybe try like this one down here. Okay, thank you for the question, yeah. Yes, Melanie came back. The two with the funky dollar sign things don't work for you. They shouldn't. Google Drive has a way of saying that little tiddly in the dollar sign, that shows the that actual file's open. So if you keep looking, you'll see the actual file name down there. Thank you guys. Yes. Keep the stuff coming. Oh, and she wrote and says the rest worked. Okay. Perfect. Okay. And now we'll come back to our regularly scheduled program. Already in session from the current slide. Okay, so this is a time for you to kind of think and begin to work. I'm going to give you just a few minutes, and I'll be taking some questions, and I'll be calling out. But let's put a few people on the spot. All right, get your audio ready. Here we go. Okay, so what do you have coming up? Once again, I want you to be able to take what you're learning here today and be able to use it. So what is a concept, and I put concept loosely. That could be a lesson that you're teaching tomorrow. That could be a unit you're teaching after the STAR test is done. Or it could be even getting ready for the STAR test. So what are some things that you are teaching soon? Go ahead and post it in the chat, and we'll call on a few people to share out. Okay, Nora Garcia. All right, let me unmute you here. Nora, can you hear me? Nora, are you there? Okay, Nora, I'm going to leave your microphone on, so when you start talking, I'll be able to hear you. Let's jump over to, how about Gabriel?
Do you think that it's okay to leave your phone by yourself?
Gabriel, can you hear me?
Not. This is the last time.
Cameron, is that yours? No. Then don't touch it.
Hey, who wants to eavesdrop on Gabriel's classroom?
Right.
I love you guys. It is so fantastic to hear the kids' voices. Thank you. All right, how about Angie? Ariella? Okay. Bueller? Brandy?
I'm here.
Brandy, how you doing?
I'm good. This question is a little bit hard for me because currently I'm substitute teaching, but I am about to do a long-term sub for kindergarten. So having a specific question or concept that I'm going to be teaching soon, I'm not sure yet because I start next week. But just in the kindergarten realm, getting the kids thinking is definitely very important because they don't know what to say a lot of times.
Yeah, fair enough. And my heart goes out to you, one, as a sub. Kudos to you. Two, kindergarten. God bless you. My daughter's in kindergarten. I can't imagine a room. Holy smokes. And three, congratulations on the job coming up.
Hey, thanks. I appreciate it. I think one of the things that I've noticed as I've been subbing in kindergarten is getting them to write, to think about any concept, like giving them a writing prompt.
Mm.
And having them not write, like if I give an example, they all want to write my example. So
Yes.
that would be something that would be a challenge, is getting them to think, if I give them this concept of going to the park, tell me about the day you went to the park. Then getting them to write that is sometimes very difficult because they just want to write what I talked about instead of what they write.
I completely agree.
I'm not sure if that's helping in this.
No, absolutely. Listen, this is an organic process. I want it to be a conversation. Let me say this. So we're going to talk just a little bit about a Kim study that was done on creativity. We mentioned divergency. And so we'll talk about divergent questioning in kindergartners. And I'm only telling you that because my youngest is a kindergartner.
Yeah.
And so she has an older sister, second grade, and whatever the older sister answers, like how was your day kind of question, she'll copy the same thing.
Right.
But if I ask a divergent question to my own kindergartner, I get an amazing answer. And just an example of like one stem is I'll say, instead of saying like how was your day, I'll say, okay, tell me what did your pencil do today in school? And so even your writing prompt about like tell me about the time you went to the park, you could even say like what would it be like? This is called a perspective shift. Like what would it be like if you if a dog went to the park? Did the swing have a good day? And you'll notice like a lot of kids' books are written in that capacity where they change the point of view or perspective.
Right.
Like the whole story about the crayons that had a bad day.
Yes.
But yeah, so same idea. So the kids love that. And the thing is that I think we hold off on asking those questions because we're nervous that they're not going to be able to answer them. But kindergartners especially show a high propensity for being able to think that way.
All right, so changing perspective is real important. All right.
Yeah, and you know what? And actually inside that folder, if you have access, there's actually a handout called Divergent Question Stems.
Yes, I saw that.
Okay, yeah, that's the one. Just play with it, seriously, because I promise you I use them with my own kindergartner for that reason, just so that she has an answer that she can't copy from her sister.
Awesome.
Well, you have been awesome, and again, congratulations. So.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, I'm gonna mute you and get you off the hook. There you go.
Okay.
Okay, so hopefully while we're talking, you've had a chance to choose a concept or a unit that's coming up, or I just want you to take some time and write out a higher order thinking question because you're asking yourself, what do you want the students to be able to answer? Now, yes, I just got done talking about, oh my goodness, higher order thinking questions in and of themselves without context are ineffective. So yeah, the next thing we're going to do is talk about the context part. Melanie is working with three-dimensional figures. Yes. Okay, so let's get into that third part. Again, hopefully you're engaging and get kind of a chance to play around with some of the stuff that you actually are using. The steps that Marzano gives us when he talks about his sequencing of questions, what it's saying is what things do you need to cover first and how do you need to move in that order. So I'll do two things. I'll show Marzano's sequence, and then I will show his taxonomy. He has a different one. But yeah, first of all, cover all the details. That makes total sense. Like what kind of things do you have to know about in order to know the topic? And then that moves into kind of like categorical questions, like how can you tie them in and where do they fit? Kind of the COD example just to help wrap our brains around it. Details. Talk about types of security. And so you might say everything from a police force. You might say an alarm system for your home. And then you say, okay, begin to categorize those. Okay, well, one is like security like from intruders. One is like preemptive security and having like a police force. And the next part is elaboration. So once you have those details, once you're able to think about them in categorical terms, can you elaborate on it? And no, this is not higher order stuff. This is what it's saying is this is the process. And so, okay, you have an idea for how to protect your home. Talk to me about what makes it safe. Talk to me about what makes it work. And then finally, that moves into level 4, which is providing evidence for that, saying, all right, so how do you know it works? So what I've really done is I've asked that higher order thinking question to evaluate a home alarm system as providing security. But I've done all that just by going through this Marzano order and thinking to myself, do you know the details? Can you talk in categories? Can you elaborate on those things? And can you provide evidence? And so I've juxtaposed this with the Bloom's taxonomy picture over here. 2 reasons. 1, to help you write your own questions. But then 2, so that you can see what we've really done is we've moved up that taxonomy level. Okay, I did promise I would show real fast Marzano's taxonomy. There are a lot of taxonomies. This is just one that I think is pretty interesting. So he calls it the 3 systems in knowledge. And I know you can read, but I'm just going to read this little paragraph on the bottom so you can look through these while I'm reading. Anushka, a class 3 student, is thinking about a birthday party she's going to attend this weekend when the teacher begins a math lesson. Anushka's self system, so once again, here's the whole self system, decides to stop thinking about the party and engage in the lesson. Okay, so that's her self. That's the control part. Her metacognitive system tells her to pay attention and ask questions so that she can do the assignment. And like right now, for example, when I turned on the microphone, we heard a teacher that was in the middle of having to provide tutorials and help out a kid. I get it. You guys are in the middle of teaching. But you're unable to activate your metacognitive system to pay attention because you have all these other things that are going on. Anushka has taken her self system, turned on her metacognitive system. Now why? Her cognitive system provides her with the thinking strategies she needs to make sense of the teacher's instruction. The mathematical knowledge about concepts and procedures make it possible for her to complete the problem successfully. Each component of the new taxonomy contributes to Anushka's success at learning the math concepts and skills in the lesson. Okay, so we got a little esoteric there, ivory tower. Point being, let's tie it back to here. You can't have higher order thinking questions in isolation. Here's a really quick, effective way of thinking through the ordering to them. What does it have to do with mind melding questions? Because you can't ask a mind melding question in isolation either. If you want to know more about this Marzano part, again, I got that from his book, Questioning Sequences in the Classroom, and that was part of his entire classroom strategy series, so it's probably in your professional development library. The first 10 pages are really good. Then you can skip some boilerplate and move to the actual application part. But don't tell him I said that. Okay. Got a few more answers here while I'm on this slide. Perfect, that's why I was doing this. Comparing text and reviewing for STAR and small groups. Absolutely, that thing is coming around the corner. Lots of review coming up. Focuses on informational text tomorrow, procedural text. Print advertisement, thinking through, you know, persuasive elements. Yeah, and Grace is throwing an idea like thinking of the concept of characters in a story for first graders. How do you imagine yourself as either the beauty or the beast, right? So you're using a lateral perspective. Okay, let's dive back into this presentation. So what makes something mind-melded? There are two parts, at least in this particular presentation. One is divergence and the other is complexity. So talk about that real fast. Divergence is where you're able to create a lot of choices. And so whenever you have to problem solve, you're coming up with as many possible solutions as you can. And then convergence allows you to come back to the best option. So, I mean, we see this all the time. If I ask a mind-melding question, it has multiple answers, just some are better than others. How do we rate that betterness? to use a bad word choice. But how do you rate which one is better? Then that's up for discussion. So a divergent question allows you to have multiple answers. Some are going to be better than others, which is great for discussions. Convergence, on the other hand, would be like a multiple choice question. So you work through the problem, and yes, there are 4 answer choices presented, but one is the right choice. That's divergence. Once again, here's a problem, multiple solutions. Here's a question, multiple answers. The other part of that is complexity. Now, I've done a picture here from Kaplan. So if you haven't heard of Kaplan and depth and complexity, she works a lot here in the local Metroplex. She works with Birdseed, for example, to make some videos. Talks a lot about language of the discipline and details, patterns. I'm not going to read all those to you, but the point is this. I mentioned complexity earlier, and it's can you have multiple things that you have to think through? And that's complexity, right? Multiple things that you have that to answer the question require you to draw on various perspectives. All right, so let's dive in some more. Do students naturally have the capacity for divergence and complexity? And this is the one that I was talking just a little bit about kindergartners. It's time for a shout-out quiz again. All right, so this was mentioned in the Ken Robinson talk, the big famous TED Talk one, about kindergartners and divergency and questions and all that jazz. Let me frame it this way. Here we go. So the researcher Kim decides to do a longitudinal study. It takes 1,600 kids and offers them a divergent test. Now, a divergent test simply means like, can they take, typically it means like an object, and can they think through multiple uses? So can they look at a paperclip and say this can be different things? Someone that is okay in this, like someone our age, for example, may come up with like 25 different uses for a paperclip. Someone that is a divergent thinker, and in this case the Torrance test of creative thinking, would say a divergent genius comes up with about 200. I'm going to say that again. Here's a paperclip. How many uses can you find for it? Typical answer, 25. Typical genius response, 200 different uses. So my question, and maybe if you're digging through the notes, you've already peeked at the answer. Let me throw it out there. What is the percentage of genius divergent thinkers in the kindergarten classroom? Once again, when Kim went in and did this huge study of 1,600 kindergartners, how many scored at genius level, 98% of divergent thinkers? Oh, I just deleted one answer for 1%. Excuse me, I'm sorry. What percentage of kindergartners were genius divergent thinkers? Meaning they could come up with 200 plus uses for an object. post your answers in the answer section. Or shoot me an email if that's not working. Okay, so I have a wide range of answers, everywhere from 2%, 20%, 35%, all of them 100%. Okay, so according to the Kim study, 98%, so 98% of 1,600 kindergartners are genius divergent thinkers. And the takeaway from that is that we have the natural capacity for divergent thinking. Now, I did mention it's a longitudinal study, so they went back later and they tested the same kids. I believe it was 5 years later. So 5 years later, how many were genius divergent thinkers? 5 years later, how many were divergent thinkers? Oh, I'm sorry, I just deleted 2 answers, excuse me. If you just posted, will you post yours again? So the first time they were tested in kindergarten, it was 98%. 5 years later, they were tested, what percentage? I see 20% for an answer, 40% for an answer, 20%, 30%. Okay, I like how the natural tendency is to think it's going to go down, because again, the highest answer I have is 40%, lowest is 12%. I put this inside, I think I did. Maybe I didn't. No, I didn't. I put it here. Okay, this is a little graphic from the study, well, about the study, excuse me. So 1,600 kids, aged 3 to 5 years, or 98% of them are divergent thinkers. Same kids 5 years later, so 8 years old and 10 years old respectively, 32%. Same ones tested another 5 years later, 10%. Now I do want to take a pause there and just say the study stopped at that point, but just for the sake of sampling, they went out and found a sampling of adults just to see where they were scoring at, and 2% could think divergently. So the couple takeaways, and again, this is quoting from Ken Robinson, but the couple takeaways are one, we have the capacity for divergent thinking. And so earlier we were talking about kindergartners and coming up with like a story about going to the park. And I would argue that they're going to copy somebody else, but if you ask them a divergent question, you're going to get a response. The second takeaway is, well, something changes, obviously. And I would say there's a bunch of different things. One might be the pruning of our neurons, right? Like we have to be able to prune back our neurons so we can make better decisions. Another one might be argued like, well, you know, we don't, as we get older, we don't celebrate divergent categories quite as much, so maybe it's educated out of us. And an example of that might be, for example, if you go to your dentist and you say, I have a cavity, you don't really want your dentist to say, hey, I've got a bunch of ideas what to do with that cavity. You kind of want your dentist to say, let's patch it up. There's one right thing to do with that cavity, and we're going to take care of it. Why am I saying all this? I'm saying it because we have the capacity for divergent thinking, and that is part of what makes a mind-melding question. So put in the right context and use them. They will seem weird at first. Remember, you're melting their minds. It shouldn't be comfortable. But put inside the right context at the right time. Kids have the natural capacity for divergent thinking, and then that same context for complexity. Being able to compare things laterally, to be able to jump across different subject matters. Any conversation with a kindergarten will show you that staying on topic is not a thing, right? It just doesn't exist. Okay, so let's do this, and then I will give you the questions to stew on, or question stems, and hopefully, again, you've already gone to the PowerPoint, the presentation folder and gotten them. How to use them, just some toss out ideas, just to get you chewing on them, Use these question stems as warm-ups, like a hook as they come into the classroom. I was in a school in Dallas yesterday down at A. Maceo Smith in a coaching capacity, had a chance to watch a first period class, and the teacher, the day back from spring break, was like, welcome back, guys, get your book out. And I was like, hey, what about a divergent question to kind of get them warmed up, to get the old neurons activated and fired up. So in the second class period, he tried them and it worked well as a warm-up and hook question. The question just came through too. I know I'm getting distracted here, but it says, do you feel that the pressure and stress on standardized tests, and that's what's changed our students' minds because they feel the pressure to only give the correct answer? Man, yes. Yes, I do. And now, is that a dismal look at the current state of education? Potentially, but I would also argue too that you can do a lot of really cool things, like one of my favorite things to do with test taking. Now remember, I didn't say all of this, but I taught 6th, 7th, and 8th grade at the same time, and it was English, so I had 1, 2, 3, 4 STAR tests to get ready for. And then, but the point is, I had to get ready for STAR tests. I had to have kids that were thinking divergently and able to write towards a prompt, but also be able to answer multiple choice questions. One of my favorite things to do is simply take off the answer choices. So you ask the question, they have to go back to the text, they have to go back to the passage. Let's talk mathematically for a second. If they're answering a math problem, they have to come up with the answer, and then after the fact compare it. Is that mind melding? No, not so much, but it allows you to see that what they can work through can have multiple angles and perspectives. So good question. All right, jumping back over here. So it could be a warm-up question that you get the class start off with. It could be informal pre-assessment question. Again, if you ask like, hey, how is a question like a seed? That was the very first question I asked. If I had people coming back saying like, well, it allows the class to grow, I would have known that they hadn't been metacogniting very much on like what makes a question and why it needs to be mind melded. So that was in and of itself an informal pre-assessment I was throwing out there. What else? Again, individual partner whole class quiz questions, essay prompts, end of test questions. Those are always kind of my favorite. So you have an early finisher for a test, and typically it's read a book or sit quietly. Give them a divergent question, see what they do with it. See if they just answer the questions because it's inside of their short-term memory, and so they could recall all that stuff just for the test. Give them one of these. See if they can actually utilize the information they learned. Bonus points, exit tickets. Okay, list goes on and on and on. And I do want to add too that I believe it was Karen who said it doesn't have to be just the teacher asking the questions. You could have the students use these stems as well to ask each other, and I promise you they have fun with them. So, okay, I'm going back to the PowerPoint here. So I'm going to pull up the STEM handout, and I want you to write down a question, and I'm going to, because of the sake of time, I'm going to then turn on the microphone and have you ask that question out loud. I'll say it again. Let's look through the question stems. I'll talk through them a little bit. You pick one that kind of really sinks your teeth into. Maybe it's a warm-up question for tomorrow. Maybe it's an informal pre-assessment question you want to ask next week. Maybe it's something that you want to wrap up and conclude with. Maybe it's a writing prompt that you think will get the kids to stretch. Either way, take a look, and then I'm going to have you ask out, or share out, excuse me. All right. So jumping over here to the handout that you guys all have, it is the Mindmelding Questions. This is based on the work of, I've mentioned these guys in passing, but Integrated Curriculum Model by Van Tassel-Basca, Depth and Complexity by Kaplan, and then Divergent Questioning by Roger Taylor. If you like Divergent Questioning, I put a separate handout in there too. So once again, dealing with concepts, so just vocabulary rules and just details. That's a fantastic pre-assessment question. All right, guys, brainstorm all of the blank that you can think of, all the types of persuasive techniques. That's a warm-up question. You got 2 minutes. You're activating all those neurons, and so you have that background knowledge kind of kicked in. Okay, share out. Issues like ethics and paradox. So what makes blank a fact? Okay, all right, so I know that cell mitosis and meiosis has to occur, but what would happen if that didn't occur? And would there ever be a time or situation where mitosis and the process of mitosis isn't true. Again, you may not have an answer to this, and that's perfect. That means that there is no one right answer. And you may say to yourself, I don't know where the kids are going to go with it. That's perfect. That is the definition of complexity and divergency, is you're going to have them be able to pull up from other areas that they know of in ways that you never foresaw. Okay, moving into themes, you can kind of see how these are laid out, so get a little more complex, right? One of my favorite ones to use inside the classroom is this one, and then I'll share one more with you too. So if you had to explain blank to people living 3,000 years ago, like what would you tell them? And again, fill in the blank. And then let's get into dimensions. Now, this whole viewpoint model, so what would blank mean from the viewpoint of a blank? Don't just tell me about your field trip to the science center. How would the field trip look from the viewpoint of the school bus? And suddenly you have these like narratives that come out and these new stories that begin to come out. And yes, admittedly that's an English-centric kind of lesson. But what if it was something like, even inside the mathematics question, how would the Pythagorean theorem look from the viewpoint of the hypotenuse? What? Are you crazy? Say it again. What would the Pythagorean theorem look like, or what would it mean from the viewpoint of the hypotenuse? You're picking an inanimate, abstract object and making them apply another kind of dimension to it. How would you feel if you were the poisonous frog from our story? Exactly. No one wants to touch the poisonous frog. He's poisonous. But how does it feel to be him? Oh, I feel rejected. One of my favorite divergent questions to ask my second grader is to say, because she's at that stage where, hey, how was your day? Good. What'd you do? Nothing. Was it good? Yes. Well, then, if you didn't do anything, how was it good? I don't know. So I'll ask her things like, well, if you were your teacher, how do you think the day went? My gosh. She'll answer things like, oh, man, I would have been frustrated because the kids at the back table kept talking and the math concepts were really difficult. And how cool. I get an insight into my daughter's day. I get a chance to peek into what she's doing, but also a chance for her to cognate with complexity in a divergent way. Okay, I have packed a lot into this training. Please go ahead and post your question. We'll share a few out. How about this? We'll call it was a soft start. We'll call it a soft ending. It is 4:02 on my clock, 4:03 now. Thank you for staying with me this long. You guys have been great. Thank you for participating. I'll leave the chat open, and I'll leave the question box open. Like Shelby's putting, brainstorm all the differences about the two texts. Keep going, Shelby. What do you mean? Do you believe your local news media is biased? Yes. But you have to look for evidence of that, right? You know what? I'm going to take that one. I'm going to run with it, Michelle. So what would happen if there was no local news media? What if we got all the news from a central government? Dun, 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 1984. Are there any similarities between our local media and other fields? Right? Do you ever compare that to business? Wait a minute. I thought the media was supposed to be free flow of information. How is it so business-centric? Doesn't that hinder or affect our media in some way? How would you feel if you were the news anchor and you were told what to read on a teleprompter, but you didn't believe it? How would the local news look from the viewpoint of an alien that came to visit? What would they think about it? How has the local media changed over time? Grace put, how would you feel if you were the Beast from our story? Yes, Beauty and the Beast. The remake is in the theater. I cut my teeth on that Disney movie. Love it. How has the story of Beauty and the Beast changed over time? What would happen if there were no beast in the story of Beauty and the Beast? Nothing. Well, okay, now you understand conflict. Once again, I mentioned it was a soft ending, so by all means, log out as needed. I'll keep sitting here blabbing until 4:10, but I love it. I love what's coming through. You guys have been great. How has technology, for example, cell phones, changed over time? You know what? I had a student, I didn't say this, but my last teaching capacity was in 11th and 12th grade as part of an ISM program that asked that very same question, how does it feel to be a cell phone? And she was doing a practicum at a NICU, a prenatal ICU, or a natal ICU, excuse me. And so she got the idea for her research to test the germs that were on the cell phones inside the NICU. I just thought it was fascinating. So she just asked herself, like, what does it feel like to be a cell phone? Because, you know, we've looked at a NICU from the perspective of the baby, the doctor, the parents, nurses. And so when she asked herself that, she's like, wait a second. We have these babies that are so prone to getting sick, but we are allowing moms to have phones in there that are dirty and next to their mouth. And so she did straight up a cotton swab, put them on a, what's it called, an auger. I'm probably saying it wrong, but that goat blood stuff. And you could see the all the bacteria that grew, all from asking a divergent question. And that kind of comes full circle. I had her ask that question. Like, I had all my kids ask the question because they were doing ISM projects, so independent student mentorship projects. I said, okay, think through different perspectives. Which news media from around the world, in your opinion, is the most unbiased? Why or why not? If a story is reported locally, is there ever a time or a situation where you can be truly unbiased? I would say, too, Michelle's talking about the news, like, do leading professionals, past or present in the news and local media, do they have a certain pattern they follow? So we watch the rise of, like, hear ye, the crier, which only delivers the news from the king in such a way that the king approves. Then we have newspapers that then report the news in the way that the moguls that run the newspaper dictate. Then we have actual news. But how has social media kind of revolutionized that? Is social media actual media? We'll be taking a field trip to the Perboro Museum next week. I could ask the students, what was the field trip like from your group leader's eyes? Yes, Brandy. You know what? Have them pick out their favorite exhibit and ask them, how does it feel to be that exhibit? How would you feel if a bunch of people come by and look at you? Thinking through the perspective of the actual display, it's just a dinosaur bone if you think about it, right? 65 plus million years old, dinosaur bone. So in and of itself, without any context, is boring. But you have to have like signage and backdrops and stories and visuals and hands-on stuff. So yeah, it gives them a chance to think through persuasive techniques, presentation techniques. How did they write up the description of the dinosaur bone without making it boring as all get out? Are there any similarities between the Beauty and the Beast? Ooh. I would say, too, are there any similarities between like the Beauty and the Beast story and other fields? So, for example, any similarities between the Beauty and the Beast story and your local media? I don't have an answer for that. Maybe that's because it's so divergent. Once again, what are the similarities between Beauty and the Beast and your local media? Okay, you guys have been wonderful. I have 4:10. I'm going to let you go. Thank you for sticking with me. Practice them. Let me show this final slide that has my contact information on it. And again, let me know the good, the bad, and the ugly. Did it work? Did it not work? You're going to try it. They're going to look at you like you're nuts sometimes, right? So how is Beauty and the Beast like local media? But yeah, let me know. Justin.Botter@region10.org. Twitter @PlayWithReason. A fairly new Twitter account, just a few months old, so having some fun with it. But again, I want to thank you for your time, and I will sign off. Good luck out there, guys.